Top of the middle of the day to you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to do a little taste test comparison. We have a completely bone stock 500i. We have a 3-foot steel lightweight bar, but we have some Oregon. It's full skip, but it's a coasty chain. We did a little woodlot makeover, as you can see. Haven't really done much sawing with some of these chains to know what I need to do. This one isn't working very well, and I thought this would be a good application test, a bone stocker versus the FRANKEN500i. Can't say world's first, I guess, at that point, but you never know. This saw is not a completely OEM parts only 500i. This saw is something interesting I've been wanting to do since back in April when I worked on my buddy Dave's saw. Mr. Out in the Wood, check him out. He's got some interesting spruce trees that he's killing over there in that country. But anyway, I wanted to try that, and this saw came in and it had a problem. This is Mr. Mullinex's saw. Hopefully he doesn't mind if I mention his name. This is Mr. Ryan's saw. We're going to get around to doing somewhat of a similar job to this, I think, but I've been wanting to try it and check it out, but it's hard to tell what you can get away with sometimes. I like to do the R&D on my own equipment because if I wreck something, it's not costing somebody else something. But we were kind of discussing the process, literally 4 phone calls in one day. He decides to go for it. We have a 500i that is not all stock componentry. I'm not sure if I'm going to go too much further with that, but at least for now, till I test some of this a little bit further. I made one cut with my chain to see, realized it's kind of an issue, and then decided let's just run this saw versus the stock one. This saw being the FRANKEN500i. I kind of like that name, actually. And then we'll be able to have a pretty good baseline to see if my idea actually works. So I'm going to warm up the stalker for a minute.
$9,480. $9,790.
Alrighty, so one of the neighbors stopped by and we had a little session. I can't say I'm super impressed with this chain. and the stops aren't down very far. That's part of it. About 35 thousandths or so, and it's pretty cold out here, as you can tell from the snow. So I'm gonna bumble through the bar change while we talk a little bit about what's going on, since I didn't talk a whole lot in the beginning. Back on the FRANKEN500i, I had a wild idea. I think I mentioned this already. We were talking to the neighbor for quite some time, to the point where now we're shivering out here. But anyway, I had this wild idea that I wanted to try, and my buddy Dave over in Ireland, since that saw was going halfway around the world, decided that we're just going to use all stock componentry. So I built his Psycho version 500i as the first saw in the process. And essentially, since that was the first saw that I'd ever seen, it was kind of an interesting situation. We talked a little bit here and there about, it's not actually an air injection saw with the fuel injected process that goes on in that machine. So has a lot of potential, but there's some limitations in the design itself. And so again, back on the concept of checking it out last April, I did a little research on a way to get a little bit more power. Now, I had the two saws that we're talking about today, the FRANKEN500 and the completely bone stock OEM 500, idling on the ground to the right. We'll go there now. And clearly you can see that the FRANKEN500i is bouncing all over the place. Which, if I'm trying to build a work saw, I'm looking for torque in this process, that's kind of what you want. So the initial idling session, because I ran it through a couple heat cycles, looked kind of promising. I made one test cut with it and realized that my chain was pretty lame, and then we started saw testing. Now we watched the stock one struggling with this pine. I'm definitely going to have to go back to the drawing board. I had a year and 5 months or something to get my chains dialed in on the other wood that we had here before. Hopefully by the time these logs are about gone, I'll have my chains dialed in once again. I'm going to have to spend quite a bit of time in this process warming the FRANKEN500i up, so we're going to pause here in a second when I get this chain dialed in. And I did have my chain pretty tight on that stock saw. Again, there's a video from last winter that talks about why it's good to run your chain snug. And I run them pretty snug generally in concept, because your chain will actually cut better. I don't know if it'll cut necessarily faster, but it'll cut better. They have a tendency to cut a little bit more true when they're tight. When your inside of your rails get worn, it seems like when your chain is dull, and we got this one pretty good. When your chain is dull, it'll start to wander a lot worse when your chain is also not very tight. Okay, we're warming up the FRANKEN500i now that she's barred up.
9320. Nine 240.
Okay, thank you, bud. Alrighty, so second time I've sawed with the FRANKEN500i. My chain is lame, that I will say, but it seemed like it did a little bit better than the stalker. We're going to have to check the description for the timed runs. I'll be sure and post that information in that section. There's a lot of little tidbits that are in there as well, talking about stuff, remembering things sometimes. But I can definitely pull on the handlebar quite a little bit more with the FRANKEN500i than with the stalker. Initial test, that's the first one that I've done. I'm gonna have to try another one. We have a couple of 500i videos in the collection running zip saw versus the stock one, and so we'll be able to use that as a comparison essentially. Anyway, it's starting to get really cold because it's clear tonight. We're going to be high teens, I think, probably cooling off quite nicely. And thanks for watching this session. Mr. Ryan's been exceptionally patient with me and his 500i in this process, but sometimes you have an opportunity, I guess, essentially, and that was just one of those deals where if it didn't work, then we're starting over, I guess, essentially. Seems to work okay. Alrighty, thanks for watching this session. Have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth, and a special thanks to my assistant, Young Master Jackson, for the hand.